Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Welcome to my classroom demonstration. This morning, we're going to do a couple of things. First off, I'm going to demo for you a couple of knife cuts, including the dice cuts, some sticks, some flat squares, and small cubes. Specifically, I'm going to do the large dice, the medium, and the small dice. Then I'll do some bâtonnet, some julienne, some fine julienne. I'll do some paysan, and then I will show you the brunoise and the fine brunoise. We'll start with our vegetables. Take a potato. You can either peel it with a peeler, or you can use a paring knife, whichever you like, whichever you're more comfortable with. The other option would be you could actually use your chef knife. You could square off the tuber and then proceed with the cuts that you're looking to do. You want to square off the bottom so you have a surface that you can actually set your vegetable on, so you have a stable platform. You then square off one of the sides. Notice that when I go through, I pull the knife through. I don't cut down on it. That way I get a nice straight cut. I've brought for you a demo model. You can see large dice, medium dice, and small dice. We'll square off our ends, and then we just cut uniform large dice from that. The large dice can be used for stews, for braising. The uniformity of the cut ensures that you will have a consistency that is identical in all parts. For the small dice, I'm going to take another potato. This time I will use my paring knife. You can peel just as well with that. You may lose some yield as a consequence of the fact that you're cutting a little deeper. With practice, you get better at it to ensure that you're not losing too much product into your waste bin. You have to make sure that your knives are sharp so you're not actually having to saw through the vegetable. As I get smaller, I'll wear my glasses to be accurate. The next cut I'm going to do is a little bit more difficult. And now we're going for the fine julienne. So you have to line up your knife, make sure you do one fine cut, pull your knife all the way through. Notice again I'm doing the roll on my knife. I'm not pulling it through, because as the shape gets finer and finer, the vegetables will want to move. You can see that we now have fine julienne start. And with a fine cross cut, we'll be able to do the fine brunoise, remembering that we want the dimension of the cross cut to be the same as the width of the slice we just cut. And you can see the fine brunoise comes out very nicely from the fine julienne. Those are some of the traditional knife cuts. I'll do one more for you. This is the one that probably gives most students the greatest difficulty, and that is the tournée. If you want to get more yield, you can actually take a potato and quarter it, and then from each quarter, get a tournée shape. The tournée, it's the 7-sided shape. It's about 3/4 of an inch in diameter and about 2 inches long. I'll start with a paring knife. I'll go from a quarter potato to a 4-sided shape, and then from a 4-sided shape, I will begin to cut my tournée. You see now I'm going from a 4-sided shape to a 6-sided shape, and as I do so, I'm creating the curvature of the classic tournée. The conundrum for most people is making sure that the sides are uniform and even. It just takes practice, as most everything else, and it's an eye-hand coordination exercise. Square off the ends slightly, and there you have your first tournée. We'll go to the next segment. I'm going to prepare a cold dessert for you. It's a tort. It's called a Zuger Kirsch tort. First thing I'm going to do in the preparation of our tort is I'm going to start a water bath. The recipe for the Zuger Kirsch tort, you start out with 125 grams of egg yolks and 75 grams of sugar. The egg yolks and the sugar, once my water bath has come up to a simmer, I will warm up slightly. I will fold in 65 grams of sifted flour, and then on top of that, additional 25 grams of toasted almonds, or ground almonds, my apologies. I'll take my mixing bowl, we'll add our eggs and our sugar, and we'll put that over our water bath. With the whisk attachment that I'm going to be using anyway, I'll give that a stir, and we want to warm that up to about 100 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. In the meantime, while I've got my water bath still warm, I can take my butter. I'll set that in my water bath and allow that to melt. Once we transfer that mix from the mixing bowl to our parchment lined pan, we'll put it in the oven. We'll bake it at 400 for about 15 minutes until it's done. This cake is consistent of 4 components: the sponge, the Japanese layers, that is the meringue with the nut flour folded in, the buttercream, and then finally a Kirsch syrup. And the next step was to fold in the dry ingredients. And that's going to be the sifted flour. I fold that in stages so that I maximize the exposure of the dry ingredients to my wet foam and minimize the amount of lumps that I create. Okay, nice folding technique. It's gentle. You want to minimize the decrease in volume. So I'm going to check my butter, which is almost fully melted. I'll let that carry over. And by the time I folded in my almond flour, that butter will be fully melted. That small quantity I'll put in at once. Again, gently folding over on itself, ensuring full incorporation and distribution in my egg foam. And then my butter I'm going to add in 2 parts, because the butter has a tendency to want to sink to the bottom. So I'll add a little bit and then I'll add the remainder. The butter is the most difficult one because it breaks, like I said, the surface tension of the foam that you've created, causing that egg foam to want to collapse or lose volume. I don't butter the sides of my pan because I want the foam to have something to climb up on. All right, so it doesn't fall when I bake it. And now we transfer this to our baking pan. So I've got that in my cake pan. I'm going to tap that a little bit to level it. And this goes into a 400-degree oven, and we'll bake that for about 20 minutes. Once baked, you'll come out with a sponge that looks like this. This has already been taken out of the pan. You can see the paper that was on the bottom peels off, and we have a nice sponge to work with. I'll come back to that. We're going to move on, and we're going to make our Japanese. I'll take my whites, I'll add them to my bowl. I still have my water bath that's warm. To the 100 grams of egg whites, I'm going to add 38 grams of sugar. I've pre-measured that. The sugar helps to build volume in the egg whites. I'll mix that up a little bit. And you can see, I'll show you in one moment, that it didn't take long at all for us to go from that liquid state to a slightly soft peak. All right, so I will fold in both the flour and the toasted almonds. I'll do the toasted almonds first. I'll distribute them over my foam, my nice meringue that I've created. Then I'll fold in the additional sugar. Being gentle and trying to minimize the volume loss. And then I'm going to pull out my sheet pan that I prepared earlier, onto which I marked the size of my sponge that I made. I will transfer this wonderful meringue to my piping bag, starting in the center, go around. Notice my tip is not touching my paper. I'll go a little beyond the circle that I've created, And then I'll do the second one, starting in the middle. Continue on. Once this is fully baked, to make sure that it conforms to the size of my sponge. Then this goes into a 350-degree oven. And like I said, we'll bake about 25 to 30 minutes. The finished product, it'll fall slightly in the oven, will look like this. You'll come out with 2 firm discs. They are hard. Okay, they are crisp. And the next step we'll do is we'll actually assemble this. I slowly add my syrup in a thin stream. Now this syrup's at 240 degrees. And if you were looking inside this bowl, what happens is the volume of your meringue radically increases because the air cells are starting to expand as they're being heated by this hot sugar. So it's almost doubled in volume again from where I started. While that's completing, I'll set up my workstation for assembly of the final product. I'll bring out a cake carousel. That makes it easy to assemble. I have a cardboard round onto which I'm going to place one of my first Japanese discs. This will serve as the base of the sugar kirsch torte. Once the buttercream is finished, we'll put a layer of buttercream on the bottom of this. And what's the purpose of the buttercream in addition to creating flavor? Why do I want buttercream here?
To be an adhesive?
Adhesive one, but think about what I'm going to be putting on top of this. I'm going to have a sugar syrup that's flavored or laced with kirsch and a piece of sponge. It's a moisture barrier. It's a gasket. Because if it got into the meringue, what would happen to this disc? It would get soft. Okay, you would lose the texture that you've worked so hard to create by whipping it up, folding all those items in, and baking it off. And I will continue to add the butter. You can see this buttercream is completed. Now this is a plain buttercream. There's no flavor in this yet whatsoever. I haven't added anything other than sugar, the meringue, and butter. And you can see it has a nice consistency, nice white color, traditionally used for wedding cakes. We're going to start out. I'm going to take my buttercream. You can see that we have some air whipped into that. I'm going to use my cake spatula, press that against the side of my mixing bowl to deflate it a little bit because I don't want that much air in it. Notice as I apply the buttercream, I'm actually not lifting the spatula off. It's a good practice to develop. And then we'll get our sponge that we made previously. All right. So the sponge is serving as a vehicle for a variety of flavors. Okay, it's got the almonds in there, which toasted when they baked. We'll bring over our final Japanese layer. We'll top this off. All right. And I'm now going to take buttercream to fill in my sides. Now you have an option. If you're really fond of the kirsch flavor, you could also flavor the buttercream with some kirsch. And just using a pressing motion, I will apply the toasted almonds with all the residue being captured by the sheet pan below. And then to finish this off, put it back on our cardboard, apply a light dusting of powdered sugar to the top of our torte. Gives us a nice white finish. I'll bring out my slicer, and what you do now is you just create a diamond pattern. A diagonal, you come back and you create your diamond pattern. You can use the back of the blade too. And that is basically it. That is the assembly of a sugar kirsch torte. Thank you for joining me for my video demonstration.